Hello, and welcome to episode 15, or as I like to call it, the final episode for our FTB Neotech Modpack playthrough. I hope you've all had a fantastic day and a fantastic journey alongside me through this modpack. And without further ado, let's dive in to the last episode. Now, this one may be a lengthier one as we do have a lot to go over and a lot to explore, explain, however you want to say that. We've gotten pretty far in the quest book here, and I think it's best just to show you our progress because look at that. You know what? Those two processing units would have been really nice to have prior to have already made the ones that I needed, but that's all right. So yeah, we've made it all the way through, most of the way through, I guess I should say, to the extreme, or what I like to call the nuclear age, because that's for the large majority what this has been all about. I didn't bother with the high pressure advanced large steam boiler this time because, well, honestly, I don't need it. We have way more than enough power just off of this, which is kind of going to lead me into everything that I want to discuss today, which is why we are ending this mod pack without having fully gotten to quantum gear, yada yada yada. Because the last step of this mod pack, in my opinion at least, is to get to the quantum gear. Sure, you can go down here and do the final challenge and get Master of Creation with the replicator, but when you have the replicator, you're just duplicating everything, and you know what's what's the point in that? What's the fun in that? We all know whenever you get to that point in Project E where you're just duplicating everything, which most mod packs don't allow anymore, then it just feels a little broken, and you're like, well, what am I doing here, really? So in between episodes, we've also gotten to autocrafting, which is something that I kind of want to lead out with explaining today, just because it is a pretty big step, honestly. And go to crafting unit. We weren't able to really get it until we got to the digital circuit and the random access memory. But once we got that, I did set up an entire auto crafting unit because it is something that you'll definitely want within this mod pack, just to craft a lot of the more complicated recipes. So it's nothing major. I know a lot of times whenever you see these applied energistics 2 setups, they're a little complicated, a little complex. We'll keep three tiny crafting units here, and then we'll be good. So yeah, essentially what we have here is 3 functionable crafting units, crafting processor units, whatever they're actually called in the mod. And then I have 1 setup of pattern providers and molecular assemblers. You will more than likely want to fill these babies up with some acceleration cards just to make things go a little smoother. But for those of you that are relatively new to modded Minecraft or relatively new to AE2, I'll explain this kind of basic and rather simply. The crafting unit has to be in some way, shape, or form in the shape of a square or rectangle. So if I had another crafter over here, it wouldn't work. If I had one up here, it wouldn't work, so on and so forth. You might be able to do a T, like a lowercase t, more like a plus sign or a cross sign. Anyways, basically what it's composed of is a crafting co-processing unit, which I don't think you necessarily need. I think you just need the crafting storage unit itself. That being said, I believe the crafting co-processing unit is what allows you to send out bulk amounts of items for them to be crafted. So while it's not necessarily needed, it is definitely useful. Okay. That's just a crafting monitor. It'll tell you what's being crafted. We don't really use it, but we got it for free from a quest, so I figured why not throw it over there. And the way that the molecular assemblers and pattern provider works is the pattern provider essentially holds all of your patterns that you can make. So if I take this out, you'll see it is indeed a crafting pattern. But whenever they're in the pattern machine, they just show you what can be made, if that makes sense. So, oh, I'm not even using that one. But you see here, we have a lot of the stuff that goes into making the digital circuit, if not everything. No, we're missing a couple things. But, here they are over here. So I recommend at least getting up to digital circuit because once you have the processing unit that you can craft, you can just come in here. I don't know if we'll have enough stuff, but we'll try. There you go. And then that's going to go through and craft everything that we didn't have for this recipe, which makes it really, really simple. And it'll even tell you, see in their top right there, whenever a recipe gets done. So you'll know whenever you can actually go back in and start crafting your stuff. All right, sorry about that. Got a little bit of a frog caught in my throat this morning kind of situation. So we'll wait for those to finish, then we can craft up that processing unit. And then that kind of leads me down into this, which is a better setup as opposed to using AE2 for everything, as opposed to using this system here that I was using. Once you get access to the red matter collectors, or really just the matter collectors in general, as well as the condensers, you're pretty much good to go with this new setup here. So what we have, fairly simple, fairly basic. You'll want to have a condenser with the item that you want duplicated essentially in the top slot, and then you're going to want to have a collector beside it. There are multiple tiers of these. I just went all the way to the end because why not? We have it, the ability to. So it starts out here with the basic collector, and once you get into Force Craft, you can build this thing. Anyways, from the first one, you can move up to the second one, and second on to the third. Sorry. Second one, third. And they're fairly simple, and once you make one, of course, they are EMCable, if that's a if that's a word. But then the glowstone on top just helps to make sure that it hits a 16 of 16 light level, which produces, maximum EMC, and you can kind of see it here. Every so often, we're getting about 800 EMC from this one collector. So if we have 4 collectors surrounding a unit, then it's essentially getting 32 3200 EMC. So for something like the drills, it goes a little bit slower, but it's still producing them and giving us literally infinite amounts. So this is my new system for everything and all things that have to do with the condenser. Instead of using this, which uses a fair amount of power and a lot of resources, honestly, to get the laser node and the barrels and all that stuff. The barrels, not so bad, but the export buses, it takes a lot, as opposed to just duplicating glowstone, duplicating the condenser, duplicating the red matter collector, and then needing only one of the item to actually get it going. So yeah, I mean, obviously one path is very simplistic and duplicatable, and one path is very complex and needs a lot of setup. So I'll leave it up to you as to which one you do, but I'm going to recommend one over the other. So if you're looking for an easier way to duplicate items, we just have all kinds of them sitting back here. So there's a block of gold, block of diamond. What's over here? Drills. I think this is all the drills. Yep. We have bronze. We have electrum. So we're good. Basically what I'm saying. We're good on everything that we could possibly want. If I wanted to do more things, you could theoretically go through and do everything that's EMCable. I've just done the things that I've run across needing within the time of using this system. So that's pretty much it that's new over here, but it is pretty big because, again, it allows us to have infinite items. And then from here, from our main system, we can start pumping items out. All right. Oh, a bit of unfortunate news. Our Enderman friend that was chilling up here for literally the entire series, yeah, something happened to him. I'm not sure what, because I was AFK when he disappeared. Which it'll make more sense whenever we start looking at nuclear stuff, as far as, why I was AFK and why I was AFK for so long. Because essentially, whenever you're dealing with nuclear stuff, you're going to want these uranium fuel rods to essentially hit 0, which, as you can see here, takes quite a bit of time, given they start out at 10 million. So it does take a rather long bit of time to run through these. But you will end up needing them so you can get to plutonium. And yeah, we'll get into that here in just a minute. So the way that autocrafting works whenever it's not just a basic crafting recipe setup, because with the molecular assemblers, essentially what they do is they act as a crafting table. So anything you can craft in a 3x3 grid, they can also craft, at least in this mod pack. So that's good for all that stuff, but what about when we want to autocraft plates or autocraft, well, we don't have this set up to autocraft, but you get what I'm saying. various machine processes. For example, we have our cables over here that can be auto processed from the pattern provider. We'll go through a simple machine because I think that setup is a little complex, and then we'll go through that one. So what's happening here is we have a pattern provider which is connected up to our AE2 system through smart cables up above. What a pattern provider actually does is it'll send the items. Now, it doesn't have an internal storage, hence the barrels underneath, but essentially it sends the items that are in the pattern that you're wanting processed. So for this, it would be, it'll send 1 copper ingot if we ask for 1 copper plate. And maybe we can just go ahead and demonstrate this. Let's do aluminum because honestly, we're kind of light on that. And I think we have more being printed down below, but this is fine. So let's say we wanted half a stack of aluminum. We'll hit next. It'll tell you what you need. We need 32 aluminum ingots to make 32 plates. That'll tell us that we have our crafting CPU ready and we can hit start. Now it's going to automatically send these items into the adjacent inventory. So it'll send it into the oak barrel. I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, so I'm sure you can lock and block this to make sure you're hitting the right block. The way that I do it is just by making sure that the only thing touching the pattern provider is the one singular storage block that I want to house the items. So this is what's, okay, moved a little fast there, but this is what took all the aluminum ingots in. And then in the back, we have it being pulled out through item pipes, being pumped into the electric compressor, which are then being pumped down through this white cable into the bottom barrel. Now you're saying, Chance, there's nothing in the bottom barrel? You're crazy. That's because the results are being immediately pumped back into the pattern provider. See, it doesn't have an internal storage in the sense of items that are being sent to it to craft with, but it does have an internal storage in the sense that it has this return inventory. What this return inventory will do is essentially send anything that's put in it back into the system. So think of it like an import bus, right? Because the only thing that does is really pull things into the system. So the return inventory is just sending items that get put in here back into your system. So in order to really complete an autocraft recipe, you'll basically need to send the finished result back into the pattern provider. If you just send it straight back into the system with an import bus, so you, for example, add an import bus down here instead of looping it back into the pattern provider, I don't know that it would consider the recipe being completed. Now, I may be wrong on that, and of course, if I am, correct me down in the comments. But I don't want to be wrong with that. And also, why create an import bus when you already have the pattern provider to receive the items, essentially. But yeah, so that's it. And you saw the little message in the top right popped up and said, you know, crafting complete. So that's with a simple setup. Now let's say you wanted a more complex setup. Maybe I don't just want to make plates. Maybe I want to make cables. Well, that's fine. That can be done too. So let's go ahead and request some cables here. And we'll just do some aluminum because why not? Now the way that I have this set up, if I can see, can't see the recipe. Maybe I can see it in here. I can. So I actually have this set up on a 2-to-1 ratio, kind of, or like 2 results are being made at the same time for 1 request. And the reason for that is because whenever you make wires and whenever you're making cables, I believe it takes 3 cables to make or 3 wires rather to make a cable. Do I have any? Yeah. So if we come over here to assembler, you see it takes 3 10 wires to make 3 10 cables. Well, that's a bit of an awkward setup because our wire mills produce 2 wires for every compressed block. So essentially you would end up with 1 wire in here left over. And you don't really want that, right? You just want it to be a kind of clean, smooth thing. That way this is always empty and I'm not like, well, every time I craft a cable, I have to come over here and grab 1 wire out. So keep that in mind whenever you're making your recipes, because you can manually set these recipes, and that's what I've done here for these processing patterns. So they're not standard, you know what I mean? You don't typically put in 3 ingots and get out 6 cables. Typically you put in 3 wires and get out 3 cables. Now the reason my recipe says 3 ingots get 6 cables is because essentially at the end of the day, that's what we need to put in, and that is what we are getting out of the recipe. So I hope that makes sense, and we'll go over this a bit more whenever I go back to the main system over there. So essentially we're putting in 3 ingots of whatever we want, and then we're getting back 6 cables. And that's all that a pattern really needs. You just have to define, at least in processing, you just have to define what's going in and what will be coming back. Now, the reason we only need the 3 aluminum ingots, or the 3 ingots of any kind, is because it's going to go into the compressors. The compressors are going to smash them down into plates. The plates are going to get turned into wires over here. And if we have 3 ingots going in, we'll get 6 wire, right? Because 1 plate gives 2 wire. So 3 ingots go in, 3 plates, 6 wire here. And then 6 wires come over here in order to make 2 rounds of the recipe, right? Because it takes 3 to make 1, so 6 makes 2. Or 6 makes 6. You know what I'm saying. But we will need synthetic rubber in this. So you'll notice here I have a dim tank, goodness me, set up with synthetic rubber automatically being pumped in here. So that's why we don't need to add synthetic rubber to the recipe, because we're not pulling any synthetic rubber from the system. We already have it set up within our processing system. So I hope all that makes sense. It's not too complicated. I know people that are just getting started on AE2 or really any auto crafting system, it can be a little complex. So then we have the result right here being pulled out from an ion pipe and of course being sent back into the pattern provider. And I think it ran through that so fast I didn't really get to watch it along the way. So let's say we want, let's just do 30. We'll need 15 ingots. We'll hit start. And again, it's pushing everything here. The pipes are round robining. So even though we have 15, we'll end up with one slightly above the other, but it'll just keep sending it back and forth, back and forth. So that's all done. It's coming over here to the wire mill, and the wire mill ships it over. And then it sends it back, and it tells the system, cool, there you go. There's your aluminum wire. So that's auto crafting for the large majority, how you do it, what you do with it, yada, yada, yada. Now, to make the patterns, you will need what is called a pattern encoding terminal. I think you can also use a wireless version of this. I usually don't worry about it because we also have a pattern access terminal, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So when you open up your pattern encoding terminal, you'll see a screen that looks a lot like this, although this and this won't be there. Now, essentially what you want to do is you want to make some patterns, right? Here's the recipe, not very difficult. If you're smart, like most people that use this, you'll set up a recipe for your patterns. So that way you can just auto craft them. If I want a pattern, I can hit next, hit start. There we go. You get 2 from every recipe. So anyways, you'll throw your patterns in this top slot here, and this is how you actually encode them. So let's find a pattern we want to encode, one that is directly and immediately observable. So emerald plates. This is a good one because we need emerald plates for some of these things. So if we want to get emerald plates, we need to put in 1 emerald. We'll get out 1 emerald plate. That is correct on the conversion. If you'll remember, the plate setup over there is very basic. It was just a barrel into a compressor into a barrel. So we'll hit that on the next. And there we go. There's our plate processor. Now, you can insert this into your system in one of 2 ways. You can throw it up top here, right? Because this is that same barrel with all the rest of the plates. Or you come over here to the machine, and open the machine, and then you can throw it in. If you want to make sure and ensure that you're always throwing it in the right place, you can throw it here, because you'll notice back over here, first things first, take note that both of these pattern providers are up against a very similar object here. They're both up against oak barrels from Sophisticated Storage. So if I come over here to the pattern access terminal, you'll see up at the top it says barrel 2. That's because we have one that doesn't currently have any recipes in it. And then we have one that has the plate recipes. So if we take the emerald one, put it up top here, and then say I came over here and I want to craft some emerald plates. By the way you craft items whenever you already have some in the system is by middle mouse clicking. So typically, let me find something that I don't have. Okay, so if you don't have any of an item in the system, it'll just say craft on it, letting you know, hey, you do have a recipe set up for this. Would you like to craft it? And you can click on it, hit next, hit start, and done, right? Now, like the emerald plates, if you have 508, if you click on it, it's just going to give you a stack. But let's say I still want to craft something. Middle click, tell it what you want, hit next, hit start, and give it some time to go through. We're at 508 right now. There you go, 509. So we literally just in live time made a pattern, put it in the system, and crafted with it. Now, let's say your pattern is non-conventional. Remember our recipe for cables, right? What is it? 6 cables from 3 ingots. So if you want to do something like that, what you'll do, let's come back over here. Let's search up cable. Are there any of these that I want to make auto-craftable? The superconductor one is a bit of a special case scenario. Let's do copper cables. So typically copper cables right here, it'll be 3, but if I hit plus, well, now it's trying to make me do the styrene butadiene rubber plus copper wire, and that's just not what we want. So instead, what we'll end up wanting is get a copper cable. And if you want to increase this, it's left click. Take the item that you want and left click it in. So we're going to end up wanting 6 cables, just like from all the rest, right? We're doing 2 recipes at once. And then these 6 cables will just take 3 ingots to make. And the easiest way to set this number right off the rip is just by having the exact number in hand and then clicking. So this is the recipe just like all the rest. And let's say I just had 1 copper ingot. Again, you can click it, come in here and click it, come in here. Oh, maybe you do have to have at least 1 in your hand. Yeah, you do. Okay. Anyways, take the copper, put it in there. Copper cables, copper ingots, and you can do this in multiple ways. So let's say I didn't currently have one of the items, but I wanted to autocraft it. We could pull this over here like so. Although then you can't increase it. How do you increase this number if you don't have it? You know what I mean? Anyone know? Because everything I click just keeps clearing it. But that seems like something you would want, doesn't it? Anywho, I guess it doesn't really matter because I do have one. So there we go. Copper cable, copper ingots, hit down, pattern is made. Again, we can come over here and throw it into the pattern provider that's already set up. We can come back here if we want some copper. Make 6 per recipe. Although, just for an example, let's say I accidentally misclicked and I wasn't thinking about the math and I did 5. It's going to go ahead and give you... What? Why is that saying 7? Did I mess up the recipe? I did. Make sure you're not messing up the recipe. And if you do mess up the recipe, bring that same pattern back. Click it in the bottom. And then hit down on it. Why is this saying 7 copper cable? All right. So that's completely cleared. If you want to clear one, just make the table empty and then hit encode. Let's do copper cable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's what we're crafting. Copper. This is what we're crafting with 6 to 3. Okay, that's the recipe I want. So now let's throw that in there. And back to here. And okay, yeah. So let's say we accidentally hit 5. It's still gonna craft you 6 because you can't get to 5. It's just going to craft the amount that you need in order to get the result. So say I did 7, it's going to go ahead and craft 12 because you need 12 to hit 7, and if you only do 6, then it's not going to be enough. So let's start, and if I'm fast enough, there it is. Cool, right? So there's that setup. Now, right here we have the synthetic rubber. Here I have the setup for automatic synthetic rubber. Sulfur dust. I don't know why that says 7 because we definitely fixed that recipe. Sulfur dust, I'll show you how we're getting infinite amounts of that here in just a second. But essentially, this is a rather complicated setup, or it looks more complicated than it needs to. So in here we have our coal dust that's being sent in, which we're getting from over there. I just didn't want to send it into the system just to pull it back out. So a dim chest is a good way if you don't need to like send the item in just to pull it back out. I don't need coal dust in the system. I just need it to make carbon, which obviously we're doing. And then we'll send that carbon over here with the water to make raw synthetic wool, which of course goes into the steam blast furnace, right? Very OG. Then the synthetic wool comes out. It gets combined with sulfur dust, which turns into synthetic rubber, and that goes up into a jumbo tank and our dim tank. This gives me basically infinite amounts of synthetic rubber to craft infinite amounts of cables with, which, trust me, you're going to need a lot of cables in this mod pack, so just do it. Now I also have this electric blast furnace set up a little bit differently. This first blast furnace now only takes uranium dust, which you kind of saw there, and makes it into uranium ingots. And then this blast furnace deals with everything else. So all the platinum, all the aluminum, titanium, yada, yada, yada. We have gone through and put upgrades in a lot of these machines. So they do run a lot quicker. So yeah, there's that. I've not really touched this setup since having abandoned it outside of testing nuclear capabilities with it. And I'll explain what I mean by that here in just a minute. So pulling us on over, this is how we're getting infinite sulfur. This is from, where's it at? Actually additions. This is the lava factory controller. Essentially you give it power, use these lava factory casings above it, and then every so often it's going to deplete the power and give you one source lava bucket right here, if that makes sense. Then we're using the electric pump from Mechanism because it's probably the easiest one to just sort of plug and go. So yeah, and then we're pumping lava up over into a centrifuge, which is giving us sulfur and copper dust. And yeah, that's about it. And it's just going straight into the system, and we're using it over there essentially. Now, over here we have emeralds being pumped into beryllium, which I didn't realize we had gained so much, but it makes sense since I went AFK for so long. And essentially you'll need beryllium for one very specific use case system, and that is taking it, making it into the ingots, and compressing it down so you can pack it into a nuclear mixed plate, which you can then turn into nuclear alloy, which is what brings us on into the nuclear age, which we'll get into in just a bit. But there are a couple other processes over here that I have set up that I would like to go ahead and take you guys and gals through. So yeah, and this is, you know, just pulling emeralds out from our system, which we're creating infinite back home, and then pumping it on through. Over here, we have a very special little setup, one that I was pretty proud of because I didn't go look at a tutorial or anything. This was just can I do this? Oh, yes, I can. Okay, cool. So essentially what this and this machine here are doing is giving us infinite amounts of fuel for our pocket generator. So if we go to just dire things, you'll see we have 51 Eclipse Ember, and honestly, we've had a lot more than that. It's just where it's at. Why is this still burning fuel? Oh, because we're not back at 100%. Okay. Which, I mean, now is probably a pretty good time to show you what I mean. So you'll know that this pocket generator that we use here uses the fuel canister from several episodes back. Now, what works best in this fuel canister is actually this Eclipse Ember. It's got the highest burn multiplier. It goes in and, you know, uses a lot of fuel amount, or fills up a lot of fuel amount. So it really is just the absolute bee's knees when it comes to providing you with fuel and infinite amounts of it, so you're not having to constantly go in there and recharge it or retick it or whatever. So yeah, you'll see whenever I put one in, it does almost 1,000 for each one of these, which is really, really good. I think we can only max have, yeah, about 50,000 fuel. So that'll pretty much cap me out there. And then you'll notice whenever I go to put this into the pocket generator, excuse me, it has a burn speed multiplier of 15, which means it's going to be generating us 900 FE per tick, as opposed to the normal 30 or something like that. Or, you know, whatever, 15 times 32, I think. So yeah, 900 FE per tick, which is enough to give me infinite flight. As this is depleting, this is constantly recharging it, as you see down here. Now, essentially, it will deplete eventually, right? Because it's not charging as quickly as what we are using it. That being said, I'm never in the air for so long that I go through 1 million forge energy. And whenever you land, it'll pick back up. Same thing, the wireless crafting terminal uses energy, and you'll notice here, every time it's used, the pocket generator just immediately refills it. So that is going to be the best way and the best route, I believe, for having infinite energy in your inventory and being able to have creative flight really, really early, because, you know, powering a 16 million EU device can be a little tricky if you're constantly trying to pull 16 million from your system every so often, right? So this gives us a more constant flow rate and allows us to, like I said, essentially have creative flight forever. Just make sure you land every once in a while. So what's actually going on here is we're sending a whole lot of gold into this barrel. All the gold is being given to the piglins. They are auto trading, or you know what I mean, they're just outputting items, most of which are going into this trash can. Now, the reason being for that is we don't need most of the items that you get from piglin bartering. So if you do $can space $B space $bartered, you'll see everything that you can possibly barter from piglins here. And in case you're wondering, how do I search like this with custom annotations with it being spaced? And you just put a space and you put the same annotation there. Sorry about that. I may have been muted while trying to explain essentially how to use EMI system over here. So yeah, essentially most of what the piglins barter to you, you just don't need. So what I have here is a blacklist mode. So I'm saying don't put coke into the trash. Everything else can go in, but don't put coke into the trash. And then over here we have a whitelist with coke set, because coke can be traded from piglins. So we're just trying to get all the coke into this barrel and send it back into the system. Reason being is over here, well, in the system, I have coke blocks that are auto-craftable. See? We don't have any coke because the coke is constantly being crafted into blocks and being sent over here. But you'll see that here in just a second. So this setup is a little complex. So I will try to go through it briskly and evenly. What you'll need is some smart cables, as well as another color of smart cables. So I've just went for yellow because it was a dye that I had. Then you're going to want a formation plane, at least one, and at least one annihilation plane with some enchantments on it. Theoretically, if you can swing that. We have efficiency 4 and fortune 3 on ours. I think you can also use unbreaking to like potentially not use energy, but it doesn't use enough energy for us to worry about that, so we're fine. Then you're going to want your goo. We're using Shadow Pulse because we want the highest possible output here, right? We want the Eclipse alloy, or the Eclipse whatever it was called, right? So the formation plane, what it does is essentially place a block down. And that's it. The way you can filter this is by putting it on its own little system and then having that system have its own import bus. So the way that these two are receiving materials is because this import bus here is pulling items out of the barrel and sending it into this small little system right here, this little one yellow line, right? Because that is this whole system. It's color coded, so it's not going to connect to this one. However, we do have quartz fiber, so it can still be online. Does that make sense? And you're going to want to use quartz fiber to connect these, because otherwise they will auto connect, and then it's just not going to work. It's going to send everything back to your system, or it's going to try and pull things that it shouldn't be. So just keep that in mind. Here we have another ME export bus, and this is essentially just pulling everything that we need over, right? So it's going to pull the void flame coal, the blaze ember block, and the block of coal. It also has a crafting card. That way, whenever these are in the system, whenever we have coke in the system, it'll automatically craft it because we have the auto crafting recipe already set up, and send it on over. Same thing with these blaze embers. Once we have 9 in the system, it'll craft a block and send it on over. Now, if you remember, the way this works with the just dire things is you place a block beside it, it slowly transforms, and then, okay, well, here's a good example. It slowly transforms, and then essentially what's going to happen is this annihilation plane over here is going to break it. So formation plane received it, placed it, it waited, then the annihilation plane destroyed it. Now, the way the annihilation planes work is by similarly setting them up on their own system and then filtering them. The way you can filter them is by having either an import bus, or rather it'd be an export bus, or a storage bus that says, hey, only allow these items into the system. So this isn't going to break, say, a stone pillar. I just put it over here because this is also an annihilation plane. It's not going to break it. Never will in a million years, because it doesn't. The system doesn't say that we can have this within the system, so it's not going to break it, because then it would essentially be breaking its own filter. Does that make sense? Because the only thing that can come through these yellow cables are the results of what's broken, and I hope that makes sense. So, say, for example, I wanted to process gold over here. You would put the raw gold ore over here, and you would put the gold, it's not ingot, what is it? So that's the gold ore. You would put the raw gold on the right side over here. And then it would place the ore down, it would break it, and give you the raw stuff. Now, the annihilation plane can be enchanted with silk touch. So if you wanted to place down gold ore and then break it and get it right back, you could do that. I don't know why you would, but you can. And then essentially, yeah, it's just set up for all 3 tiers that are before the eclipse. So if we look at just dire, we have the primal coal, which we don't want to make because this doesn't go into blaze ember. It just kind of stays at where it is. And the way that you make primal coal is by putting a block of coal beside any of this goo. So we're just skipping this step outright. And then the way you get blaze ember is by placing a block of coke next to either blaze bloom goo or higher. So I can place a block of ember beside blaze bloom goo, or I can place it beside the void, or I can place it beside shadow. The reason we're using shadow pulse is because we want the eclipse ember. So it can take blaze ember, it can also take void flame, and get us our result. So basically it sends a block of coke, breaks the block of coke, once it transforms into the blaze ember. Then once we have enough blaze ember in the system, it's going to autocraft that, send it over, as you see here. Once that goes through, it's going to break it and send the results over. So there you go. So it just sent void flame coal into the system. Then once we have enough void flame coal, again, it'll send the block over, come through, get converted, get broken, and we'll end up with the eclipse ember, which we can of course use to fuel us forever and ever and ever. Now moving on over, I don't know that we showed the titanium drill setup. Maybe we did. It's literally just producing uranium and iridium, because you don't need the fluorite that it produces. It also produces fluorite, but once you have one fluorite, It is EMCable, so you never need it again. So my theory, don't fucking waste your time. Don't waste your time, don't waste your energy. Get one fluorite out and then void that shit. And then, yeah, you know, they're going through some macerators. They're doing their thing. A good way to round robin, by the way, that I've found with these item pipes is by keeping the distance equal. Keeping the distance, the direction-ish kind of equal. So here you'll see that we have one pipe coming out and then one pipe going in and one pipe going in. So it's sending one uranium into here. Well, we don't have any being processed, but it's essentially sending one uranium dust over here and one over here and one over here and back and forth. The reason I did this is because I wanted to keep a source of uranium dust pure, free, and clear. And then this dimensional tank is actually processing that uranium and sending it I guess it's sending it back to the main system. But nonetheless, it's getting smelted down. Oh, that's right. It's being sent over here. I said we were going to explain it later, and then I forgot that uranium actually requires to go through the EBF. So if you want to get uranium, you have to put dust in, and you get one uranium ingot out. So that's kind of why we have this set up all on its own. So that way our system over here, which then takes uranium, right? Uranium ingots, and gives us yellow cake uranium, never runs out and is always backed up, and we have uranium dust that is available. Now, the reason that we wanted the uranium is pretty simple because I decided we were going to use force-infused diesel to power our system instead of just regular diesel over here, which I may want to turn that off. I don't know why that runs out. I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with like power consumption, yada, yada, yada. But we always produce enough that it doesn't really matter. Actually, you know what? Let me leave one of these connected, right? Why is everything draining so heavily from this? And why can I not set priority on cables? That'd be kind of nice. Because I'll bet you this one, yeah, it's only draining 2.4K, which is fine. We're not going to go through that ever. But yeah, for some reason our diesel isn't staying caught up with. But initially, whenever I tested this system, it was. Maybe it's because we're draining too much power all at once now. But no fear. I mean, this large force-infused diesel generator is definitely going to take care of us. Now, the reason I went with force-infused diesel is if we look at diesel here, you'll see that it actually burns to give you 2200 EU per millibucket, which is insane. Diesel itself only gives you 400, and boosted diesel only gives you 800. So whenever you do this, you're getting damn near 6 times the output from initial diesel, right? 400 to 2200, which is just a little insane given there's not a whole lot that goes into this. So boosted diesel you get just by combining it with diethyl ether, which of course we've shown all that before. That's good to go. And then with the boosted diesel, you can combine it with Fortron, with Force Gem, and with Yellow Cake Uranium. Ignore the boosted diesel that kind of got put over here. That's byproduct. Oh, no. We need boosted diesel. For some reason, I was thinking it was force infused. So yeah, you'll need everything that's in this machine. And I recommend locking the recipe as what I've shown before. Now, force gems, they are EMCable, so back in our main system, we just have those being infinitely produced and being pumped in to the system from here. So this barrel is being set up for force gems and for uranium, and then all the rest of these I just sort of have filtered out. It's technically this simple stone pillar block you see, but we never import that in through the system. We're never asking for it in the export bus, so it's never going to fill up the barrel. So theoretically, if you just wanted one block and one block or one stack, whatever, you could fill up this whole thing with filters, And you just come over here and hit, you know, slot memory. I'm not going to do it because I don't want it to mess with it. But yeah, then you're good to go. The uranium's going into an enrichment chamber. That's being pumped over, so that's how we're getting the yellow cake uranium. Force gems, like I said, they're being EMC'd back at the base, so that's how we're getting that. Boosted diesel, we've already been through that. And that just leaves us with the Fortron, which was probably the most complicated in this, even though it is one of the simplest. And that's simply because there's no explanation anywhere that I could find on how to actually do this. So the only machine you'll actually need to produce Fortron is the coercion deriver. And essentially what this does is pulls normal power, pulls whatever base power you have, and then turns it into Fortron. That's it. You may have to click this button. I'm not going to because it's running and I don't want to fuck with it. Oh, and you'll need redstone. You will need a redstone signal going into this. So here I have a lever turned on and we're good to go. Good to go. Goodness me, sorry. All right. So then we just have it being pumped up into a dimensional tank, which is being sent over to here. I didn't know if we were going to need Fortron for anything, hence the tank. But I don't think I've used it for anything else. And then if I want to check and see how fast our system is actually draining, I just come in here to the electric mixer, and over on the right, you can see the force infused diesel. It's going down at a fair enough rate. Once it gets to 11,000, it'll run this recipe back through because of course, force infused diesel produces 5,000 every recipe, right? So you take 5,000 boosted, add a force gem, yellow cake, 10,000 Fortron, and then you're good to go. And yeah, and I have not run out of this so far. The diesel generator doesn't use enough of it. I run out of this stuff more often than that stuff. And really, I don't know why. Maybe one of y'all can explain this to me. So essentially, when I have more of these diesel generators turned on, the network transfer is down. So you'll see it's at 5.7 right now. Let's say I go through and I hook back up 2 of these. Now it says that our network transfer is 4.2. But that doesn't make any sense because technically the network should still be transferring the same amount, right? I don't know. Maybe one of those things, like I said, that I'm just kind of overlooking, but it is what it is. So that is our power setup. That's most all of that. This is the implosion compressor that you'll need to build at some point in your future. So you can take industrial TNT and, I mean, just get to exploding shit, right? This is how you get beryllium ingots. This is how you turn your mixed blast-proof ingots into blast-proof alloy, which, of course, you will need for getting your alloy plates. Now, technically, your alloy plates, you can also just take your mixed blast-proof ingots and put those directly into an electric compressor. But then it takes you 30 seconds to get this recipe. This takes 40 seconds, but this only takes 0.5 and gives you 3 as opposed to needing 2 for 1. So this recipe, you use 2, you get 1. This recipe, you use 1, you get 3. Pretty easy to see which recipe you want to be using. Now the industrial TNT, this stuff is really easy to make. We have the tooling that is coming out of our machine over here, which we were just never using before. So here's the tooling. It's being pumped down and into a machine that's also getting nitrogen. Nitrogen comes from over here, right? Remember, we have our air intake outputting nitrogen, argon, and helium. Hold on, let me make sure. Oxygen. So if you put liquid air in, you get oxygen, nitrogen, and argon from a centrifuge, and that is what's going on right here. So, and then we just have a dim tank with nitrogen. That's oxygen, liquid air. Nitrogen. And then, yeah, you just provide it with infinite amounts of sand and infinite amounts of gravel, or flint, sorry, which of course both are EMCable. So you just produce that in the system, pump them in, and you're good to go. We have 8,000 because I don't imagine we'll need any more than that, right? Hopefully. I mean, you may end up needing more than that, but hopefully your system will continue to produce everything that you need for it. All right. So that's most of that explained. And let me go back into the quest book just to see if we've missed anything here. That's not the one we want. To the extreme. Oh yes, the gravi chest plate, the thing that's giving me freedom to fly. This really isn't that difficult to get to once you're in this phase, right? So I believe in the last episode, we did end up going through and getting most of this sort of precursor stuff to the gravi chest plate. Superconductor. I know we did this last time, but just as a little recap, you just need the dust, which you get from mixing, you know, this stuff that we already have access to. And then you throw that into a canthanol EBF, you cool it off, and you're good to go. Now you will want a lot of this superconductor stuff, so try to make sure you have good production for it, yada, yada, yada. But once you have it, it's really simple to make the chest plate. These plates only take one. The coil takes 8 cables, but I'm pretty sure it gives you that. Yeah, it gives you that right here. So whenever you make one ingot, it's going to go ahead and give you the 8 cables. Just make sure you go ahead and use it on the gravi chest plate. You'll need 2 cooling cells, which are probably the biggest pain in my keister to make, just because of these advanced pumps. You like have to go through and make the advanced motors, and really it's the rotors that get me. But our setup is, I mean, it's still working, rocking, rolling, yada yada yada. I don't think I have anything in there now. Yeah, no, I cleared it out at the beginning of the episode. But yeah, that's essentially all you'll want to do. Once you have the chest plate, just fill it with power in some way, shape, form, or manner, and then you're good to go. Also, you'll probably notice in the top left, it tells you how much energy you have. It also says enabled. I believe V, yes, it's V, clicks to enable it or disable it, so I can't fly now. And if I hit V, I'm back to flying. Hit V while I am flying, and you're, of course, going to start falling. So that is that all explained. Nuclear reactor. Whoa. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me. We'll go through this really quick. So as I've said before, you're going to need this nuclear alloy paste, which you get from nuclear mixed plate going into an implosion compressor with industrial TNT. Now you do get a 3-for-1 here, so that's pretty good. And the way that you make this stuff is with beryllium, which we went over earlier, cadmium, I'm pretty sure it's cadmium, maybe. Anyways, that's going to be coming out of over here, which we got whenever we got access to the stainless steel drill. You don't see it in here because it's immediately going into the system. But if we take a look, there's the yttrium, there's the neodymium, and there's the cadmium. So yeah, you're good to go on that. And then the blast proof alloy plate, like we showed earlier, is just the mixed blast proof ingots, which I prefer to use this method, but I digress. So once you get enough of your nuclear alloy plates, you're going to want to make your, basically everything that the quest line says there. And that's going to give you everything you need to build this, which is a small nuclear reactor. Make sure you have this set to small because that's what it's going to be. And then, just like always, use your wrench, place down the nuclear reactor, and you'll see everything you need on how to build it, where to place it, yada, yada, yada. I will go ahead and give you this little tidbit for free. All of the hatches, whether they are items or fluid, go up top. Now, this little system may be looking a little crazy to you, and that's because I went through and I tried several different iterations of this, and ultimately I came back to just saying, you know what? I don't want power from a nuclear reactor. I know, it sounds bad, But hear me out, okay? So the nuclear reactor, the way that it provides you power is through steam. Well, that's fine and all, but remember, we kind of abandoned steam a while ago. Whenever this machine, I was like, this don't make no sense. It doesn't work. Well, I think I jumped the gun a little bit. Because it does work and it does make sense when you provide it with regular steam that you're producing from a nuclear reactor. Because that nuclear reactor can produce, I mean, it's a lot. It's like 8,000 steam per slot of water that we were being put in, or something like that. So, like, it was producing way more than enough steam to power our machine over here. So, if you do want to use still steam as your main form of energy, feel free to, and it'll save you from having to do all of this. Like, you don't have to do the force infused diesel in order to progress to the pack. You do have to do a nuclear reactor to progress to the pack. So, you know, if you don't want to do the force infused diesel because it's a bit of a complicated setup and you don't technically need it for power, given you have to go through this to complete the pack anyways, and it provides, you know, substantial power, that makes sense. Go for that. But if you don't want to wait on a nuclear reactor, you want some good power early, this machine's not too bad. The heaviest cost, of course, is titanium. So the way that it works, you'll notice up here we have item hatches, and it's a little hard to tell because they are all item hatches and they're all the exact same thing. But let's say I went up here and I broke this middle one and I put in a fluid hatch. Well, down in here, you would see that change as well. This would be empty and it would, you know, be able to hold water or heavy water or whatever substance you're putting in there, right? Now, this is important because the location of all your fuel rods and all your components within the nuclear reactor matters. It matters because, well, I can't hit anything on this. It matters because there's a lot of different factors that go into calculating exactly how this all works. And I'm not going to try and explain it right now, but I will if I remember. And if not, someone, you know, remind me in the comments. Leave a link in the top pinned comment to a video that it does an excellent job at explaining exactly how this system all works. So I'm not even going to try and get into explaining to you the difference between thermal neutrons and fast neutrons and the absorption probability and the scattering probability. Like, if you care enough, go watch that video. It'll explain it and you'll be like, oh, okay, this makes so much more sense now. And if you don't, well, then just don't fucking worry about it. You know what I mean? Go look up an example, follow the example, and hope that it works. That's the best that you can do. So now, typically, you would have water in here. And honestly, if I was going to do an honest setup with this nuclear reactor, where it's like I'm trying to get power and I'm trying to make it efficient, I think the setup that I would go is an X with water and these this little cross T sort of with the uranium. So real quick, I'll show you here. I would do these as fuel rods, and then I would do these as fluid hatches that take water in or whatever you're trying to put in it, right? Because you can put in water, you can put in heavy water. There's numerous different types of water that you can put in there. I was just using regular water because it's the easiest thing to mass duplicate and mass use, and we're just pulling it straight out of our AE2 system. So the way that would look is, you know, you have your water pump, you would just literally pump your water straight into whichever fluid input hatches or fluid hatches you have. Now it's kind of good that I said input there because you'll notice that these are not nuclear item input hatches because we don't have nuclear item output hatches. The output hatch is the input hatch. When this depletes, it'll put the depleted uranium fuel rod over here to the right, and then we can put more and more in. If you want to pump some in, what I was doing earlier is just putting a barrel down and just run the pump all the way down into it. I figured it would make things look a bit more complicated and unnecessary, so we just got rid of all that. But yeah, you put in your uranium rods, they will slowly deplete. You can see the remaining absorption by holding shift while hovering over one, and that'll tell you basically how much life it has left, which they start out with 10 million, so they have quite a bit to go. Now, me personally, the reason my machine is set up like this is because I just want all of these fuel rods to deplete as soon as possible. They take a bit longer to deplete when being used in an actual setup because your whole goal with the actual setup is to make everything very efficient. Make sure you're producing a whole lot of steam and that water's in the right place. And I mean, you can't put non-uranium fuel rods into something that has water in it because obviously one of those slots is going to be taken by the water. So if you want to use this for power, just make sure that you still use some fluid input, positions up top, fluid input hatches. And again, I would recommend going and watching that video linked somewhere down below just because he does an excellent job of explaining the system as a whole, its usabilities, why you would want this, that, or the other. So yeah, that's the nuclear reactor. Essentially, everything is going to come out of these hatches. So if this was a fluid hatch, we would have water going in, which is what you saw in the beginning. Let me see if I can do this real quick. We would have water going in, we would have steam coming out, and we would also have deuterium coming out because, let me see if I can find this quick enough. Here we are. Because whenever water absorbs a neutron, and I'm just going to say this and then we'll move on from it. Whenever water absorbs a neutron, you get 1 millibucket of deuterium. And so that's how we have deuterium. So essentially you'll be pulling steam out, you'll be pulling deuterium out, and you'll be pushing water back in. Now make sure that your deuterium, say it builds up all the way, make sure you have a trash can off to the side. Otherwise, it will eventually stop your system up completely. So you don't want that if you're trying to rely on this for power. These bad boys are finally down to 4 million, but they still have quite a ways to go. Now, the reason that I'm not... Oh, excuse me. The reason I'm not concerned with using the nuclear reactor as is intended is because I don't need the power. I have so much power coming from this over here that I have yet to need it. So why bother, basically? Why have this set up creating more power that I'm not even going to use? And especially since in a steam turbine, if the power isn't used, it's loosed. I mean, y'all know what I'm saying. It's an efficiency thing. So basically, I just want this running through fuel rods so we can convert more and more. Oh, okay, let's go. So we can convert more and more of this into plutonium, which is very, very useful. I'm just going to go ahead and get all of this. Craft 42. Man, that is a lot of plutonium. You also get uranium-238 from this, but we're not going to be focusing on that because that's if you want to make your reactor more efficient in one way or another, and that's just not something that we're really going for in this, right? So what you do with the depleted uranium rod, sorry, I didn't really explain that, is you put it into a centrifuge. Maybe the best way to show this is like this. And then after 300 seconds, after 5 minutes, which is a long time to wait, you'll get 27 plutonium, 53 uranium, and 1 possible chance of a uranium-235 tiny dust. Now, each of the depleted rods gives you different outputs. So this one gives you 53 and 27. This one gives you 48 and 24. You have 36, 18, and 18, right? Uranium-235 dust, which is important to note. And then that's your fuel rods. I think you also have a MOX version of all these. So let's see if I type in fuel. Yeah, so you also have these, which don't give you any uranium-238 back. 235, sorry. So just keep that in mind if you want to go through and learn all of this. Like I said, I'll leave a video down below, and I do highly recommend checking it out if it's something you're serious about getting into. Now, one other purpose of the nuclear reactor is to get deuterium. Deuterium? I hope I'm saying that correct. Which is nice because then you can use that deuterium to get tritium. Tritium. Maybe it's just tritium. or you can use heavy water. So if you pump heavy water into the system and it gets hit by a neutron, same as water, it's going to turn into tritium, whatever. And you can actually get this heavy water by centrifuging, by centrifuging regular water. You can also get this heavy water by combining oxygen and deuterium. So that's pretty good because you get 3 buckets here from 2 and 1. And then, of course, you can get it from the pressurizer from using various methods there, but we're not going to worry about all that, right? Basically, all you need to know is you use heavy water to get yourself... Is it not on this page? What? Look, I'll just go through this retrofitted. You'll need your heavy water in order to get the tritium, however you want to say that. You can also use high pressure heavy water, which sounds like a bit more of a process. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. However, the method that I've chose to go is by using hydrogen. Now here you'll see it doesn't say how many millibuckets you actually get, and that's because you get 1. So I'm not sure if it's just a bug, but you do get 20 deuterium millibuckets. And of course, it's a slow process. It's a very slow process, but eventually it'll stack up. Down here we have 90 buckets, which is nowhere near the amount that we had up there just from running a reactor. So obviously you get much, much greater returns from using a reactor, but you don't need all that much. If you look here at the nuke, you only need 50 millibuckets of tritium to make 2 nukes. You only need 100, so, double, deuterium to make 2 nukes. And we'll get into nukes here in a bit. So that is this setup that you see here. We have an electrolyzer, which is turning water into hydrogen and oxygen, and you'll see that it's going at a rate of 52 overclock, which is insane. It's filling up the jumbo tanks, fueling this centrifuge, which we're using to pump out, deuterium and tritium. I'm just gonna say it different every single time, and eventually one of them will be right. Again, I do recommend using some upgrades in this because typically, if you want to do this, it's going to take 1 whole minute to produce 1 little millibucket. Ours is running at an overclock of 13, so whatever 60 divided by 13, that's how often this is producing, the respective amounts here. Next up, we have this, which is just a helium setup, and we'll get into this here in just a bit, but it's very, very minuscule in its use and why we need it, kind of, sort of. So you just take helium, put it into a centrifuge, and you get helium-3, which we're using in a dimensional tank, and it's been all drained out, but not all used up, and I'll explain that here in just a minute. So yeah, that should be everything dealing with nuclear stuff. So basically everything that you get from a nuclear reactor or could need from a nuclear reactor, I've already answered in another manner. That's why I'm like, nuclear reactor? I mean, other than the plutonium from the depleted fuel rods, we don't need it. We have power, and we have the deuterium and tritium, whatever it's called, all right? We have the 2 outputs that you would be using a nuclear reactor for. So like this setup here, 1, 2, 3 machines, seems a whole lot less complicated than creating heavy water, sending that heavy water into a nuclear reactor, and then letting the nuclear reactor do its thing, right? So that's all that. We're going to move back over here to our assembler line because this is kind of where the magic happens. So here we have the cooling cell, which I'm pretty sure we showed that in the last episode, but in case you've forgotten or whatever, taking cryo fluid, inserting it, and that's how you get your cooling cells. Don't think we need that except for that. And then we have our tritium and our deuterium, and this I'm not piping out of because we're producing so little. We only have 4 buckets. I really want to be able to control those buckets as best I can. So basically I've just taken a bucket from the tank. So I guess we really have like 6 buckets. Anyways, I took a bucket from the tank, put some over here, put some over here, and we're good to go. So you'll need a combination of this stuff with deuterium if you want to make nukes, and of course you need nukes if you want to make a singularity, and you need the singularity if you plan on making the UU matter or really progressing further down the line. And then you'll need it combined with the cryo fluid if you want to make the qubits, not quite sure there. But of course you'll need these in order to make the quantum circuits, which is how you get into the final tier of machine holes and all that. You're getting into quantum and plasma and all that kind of good stuff. So you'll notice here that I've already made a qubit, and that's because, well, I just didn't want to be trying to gather all this stuff up, because in order to get the superconductor wire, you need, sorry, not the superconductor wire. In order to get the superconductor, cables, you'll need the superconductor wire and cooling cells, and it's just a bit of a process to go through all this to get the plutonium batteries, which is what you'll need for the quantum circuit, and so on and so forth. So, you know, just in general, if you're looking through this stuff and you see that you're going to need something in the future, go ahead and prepare yourself. Anyways, moving on down, we have the helium, and I'm going to go ahead and take these results out here. I've become death, destroyer of worlds. Yeah, there's a nuke. Down here, we have the quantum circuit board, which, as you can see, is a processing, plutonium battery, superconductor cables, which is why you'll need the cables, and iridium plates. Again, iridium plates, not made in a conventional sense. You're going to need this mixed iridium ingot, plus the industrial TNT in a compressor. And the way you can get these is by putting one iridium ingot in the middle in a packer, and putting in 2 blast-proof alloy ingots. So, fairly simple there. We have all that stuff. Let us, I believe I can actually make one of these. Yeah, because I went ahead and made the cooling cells since we already did that before, the processing units, all that. So let's do it. Let's get into quantum. Mobius strip eigenvalues? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, okay? I'm not a scientist, damn it. What's he saying in Star Trek? I'm a doctor, damn it, Jim. Anyways, yeah, so we got the quantum circuit from that. We also got paid. Oh. $5 quantum circuits I just accepted. Clicked on that. Oh, they're there. Okay. Maybe it bugged out. Maybe I just didn't see it. So yeah, 5 free quantum circuits, and then we can go through and make... Can I make this? Oh, I can make one of those. And then I just need 2 of these. 1, 2. Perfectly enough. No, we're going to need more superconductors, which means we're going to need more cooling cells. Like I said, that's always been the biggest pain in my keister. I think, yeah, we basically have everything in there except for the small heat exchangers, so I could probably go through and make that really quick. Hopefully we have enough for everything. I'm not gonna lie, we've been... Shit, do I need 2 cooling cells for this? I feel like I need 2. I do need 2. Okay. So yeah, we've been kind of scraping our teeth. I don't know, that's some real horrible imagery there, but we've been scraping our teeth trying to get by in this last little bit here, just because we're like, you know, I know I'm in the home stretch. You know I'm in the home stretch. This whole place knows we're in the home stretch. All right, so that's that. Wait, shit. What did I run out of there? Motors? Definitely not motors, right? Oh, no, you're right. I only made 2 of them, and 2 of them only makes 1. See, this is what I'm saying. The cooling cells, they always get me because I'm like, yeah, I need 2 and 2. Oh, I only got 1. I don't know why. Just the numbers, Mason, they just don't make sense. Sorry, I use that reference a lot. It's a good reference. Good reference. Here we are. We're gonna have fluid cables. Okay. So yeah, then you'll just throw this in, throw that in. We'll get our cooling cell, and then we can make a couple more superconductor cables. Which, do we have any more superconductor wire? I don't think so. Also, where are all my superconductor ingots at? Because they can't be in the system. Oh, you know what? I did already have some superconductor wire. That's aluminum. But I'm gonna need more than this, aren't I? No, I just need 3. Alright, well, cool beans. Maybe I left it down in the mixer. Okay, so there's that. And then how do we make this? It's right here. Put those in. Don't need that extra one. And how long does this take? 30 seconds. Okay, so that's going to take just a minute there. And then we'll have our quantum machine hole. And yeah, that'll be on into the quantum phase and so on and so forth. Now, the reason that I'm choosing not to go all the way through and get the quantum gear is this gives you creative flight. Cool. I already have it. So, you know, cool, I suppose. It also makes you practically unkillable and makes you be able to kill everything in one hit. But I don't need that. I don't need to kill everything in one hit and never die and yada yada yada, right? I don't need this to create nether stars because nether stars are EMCable. You do need it for the ultimate replicator and ultimate singularity, but like what are you realistically using these singularity for? Big quantum barrels and whatnot, quantum upgrades, but like you don't need the 64 singularities that they give you. Just don't. So quantum machine hole. And just that way we're in here. We're in the thick of it. I'm in the fusion phase and all that, but like I don't wanna. You know, I don't need more power to power things that I'm already powering perfectly fine. I'm not sure how much power you guys and gals are using in your setups. I'm using 5,000. I'm at the end of the pack. You're trying to get me something that produces literally like 100,000 something to produce over 1 million EU per tick. Yeah, so it's like, what do I need that for? I'm not using 1 million EU per tick. Maybe if you're speeding up all your machines and all your processes like a ton, maybe you're trying to get master of quantum and hit 1 billion FE so you can get a creative energy cell, which is a little ironic, don't you think? I just produced 1 billion FE, so give me infinite energy. Okay. It's just it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like there's not a good reward in that I can justify to myself being like, yeah, I'll spend another 5 days on this pack just so I can get this. I don't know realistically how long it would take. Probably not too much longer, given we are right here in the home stretch. But as I said, the grinding in this pack, it's not linear. It's a curve, okay? It's a upward bell curve, if you know what I'm saying, right? And if you know, you know, and if you don't, well, you know, maybe Google it. But it's certainly an upward bell curve. What I mean by that is this is just kind of the first half of the bell curve. So it starts out kind of low, and then it starts getting more and 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 more. Unless, of course, you're using automation and you're just fully automating everything, which I chose not to do. It's up to you. A lot of you probably did if you're playing through a Greg Tech like pack. But since this was kind of my first one, it was kind of like dipping my toes in and understanding what all needs to be done and getting a good rhythm and flow to everything. So, with that being said, is there anything else that I want to do here? And sure, we could go through and we could do pneumatic craft and attack of the drones, and we could figure out how drones work, and we can do mechanism, but like we do mechanism plenty through tons of other packs. Pneumatic craft will show up again. I promise you that. It's not gonna go away. People find it fun and interesting, and it is. It's a whole different way to power things and to use things. I was really hoping these uranium fuel rods would run out by the end of the episode, but I guess that was a little bit of a pipe dream. So y'all see here, it took us about an hour and a half to get through this episode. We started out about 4 million. We're at about 3 million now. If you know a quicker way to drain the remaining absorption off these fuel rods, I'm sure we'd all love to hear it. But until then, I guess you're just sitting and waiting. And that's kind of what this little setup right here, if you're like, Wow, I wonder what that ugly ass block pillar thing over on the wall is. It's my my hidey hole. I don't ever want to be attacked while I'm AFKing or have something happen, so put myself in a corner essentially. Um, but yeah, I mean that's I don't know what else you would want to do in this pack. Maybe you want to go make 100 million EU per tick or something. You know, maybe that's what tickles your fancy is just seeing how much power you can truly make. For me, well, it's just about the journey. It's not about the end result because the end result can always go further and further out. It's about the journey. We had a lot of fun on this journey, I would say. We learned a lot of stuff, and I really got to experience a Greg Tech like pack without maybe having to go full balls to the wall diving in, right? So, with that being said, if there's anything that I may have left out in this episode or in this series in general, please be sure to leave it down below. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate all of your support within the series so far. As I said, I am sorry for it being a little bit of a longer episode here, but if there's anything you have questions with throughout the mod pack, feel free to ask at any point on any of the videos. If I can't get to it, I'm sure someone else will respond in the comments. Thanks again. Hope you've enjoyed. If so, please be sure to leave a like down below. Comment in the comment section if you have anything that you need help with. Share this out with friends, family, strangers down the streets. It doesn't matter to me. As per the usual, I do hope you all stay safe, stay awesome, and stay crafting. Until next time, you beautiful, beautiful people, peace out, and I hope to see you in the next series. Bye bye.